Good morning. We're having everyone trickle in and we're going to start in just a minute. We appreciate everyone logging in to watch this webinar. It's presented by our law firm, Beasley Allen. We're going to do these on a quarterly basis. It's free to the viewers and you'll get CLE credit through our office if you registered and provided your information. My name is Rob Register. I practice in the Atlanta office. I mostly do medical malpractice, and I handle severe catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases. I have with me Tom Willingham, who's also out of the Atlanta office. Tom has specialized in auto product litigation his entire career. He has tried and handled just about every type of auto product case. In fact, last week, he wrapped up a 2-week auto product case involving a child seat that rendered a boy quadriplegic. The case resolved on the final day of trial as the jury was deliberating, and we think we provided a great service to this family that will allow them to adapt to the challenges they face with this young boy. Today, the purpose of today's webinar is to hopefully share with you information that can help you in your practice. A lot of you probably handle auto cases, wreck cases, car crash cases, and we're not trying to take those or ask you to give us those. We'll certainly work with you if we can help you on those. What we're here to talk to you about today is you handle your car crash cases the way you always do. But think of us whenever you have a severe injury, paralysis, death, amputation, because you might have in your office right now an auto product case, and we might be able to help you recover a lot more for your client to help them out. Tom is going to go through the types of cases that we look for. Beasley Allen has 6 or 7 full-time investigators that are former State Patrol, SCIRT team members, their own staff, their employees. If you call us, we can send somebody out the day you call and we can look at the vehicle, and usually within a short period of time, we can tell you if we think the case has some potential. And again, we'll work with you in any way that we can to help you and your client recover what they're entitled to. So Tom is going to start, and we have a PowerPoint that you'll be able to see. There's a question and answer tab. If you have questions during the webinar, just type them in. We'll try to get to them as we can. I'll see them come up on the screen. I may interrupt you, Tom, and tell you that somebody has a question.
One of the things, Rob, that before we get started, that sometimes gets overlooked is single vehicle crashes. So a lawyer, for example, years ago, about 8 years ago, did not know about the Takata recall, and it was a single vehicle accident, and he was about to close his file when he called me. And a lot of folks through their practice don't know to be on the lookout for single vehicle wrecks, and those, quite frankly, are probably 85 to 90% of the cases I handle are going to be single event crashes. So it's very important to not only look at the cases, obviously, that involve car to car or car to truck, but single vehicle crashes as well. And in my folks, I apologize in advance if I mess up technologically. Rob knows what a techno-challenged individual I am. But one of the things that we're seeing now, finally, is NHTSA is finally beginning to perform some defect investigations. They are woefully understaffed and underfunded, but after the Ford Firestone fiasco and then with the Takata disaster, they have finally been forced to do their jobs during their coffee breaks. But they have actually started to do a better job initiating recalls and initiating defect investigations. They have drastically risen since the early 2000s, primarily, as I said, as a result of the TREAD Act, which is a result of the Ford Firestone Explorer disaster, And they have started to track defects. And this led to, well, one of the cases that we handled led to the worldwide Takata airbag recall. And this happened approximately 2014, where we had the first case outside of the traditional Honda Takata airbag defect, where the exploding airbag was only happening in Honda vehicles. And Honda and Takata basically had hidden information from the government that testing had shown that these bags were rupturing. And the initial, like I said, defect investigation was exclusively limited to Honda vehicles. But in 2014, we had the first case that was a non-Honda vehicle. It was a GM car, and it led to the worldwide recall, where virtually every automotive manufacturer, with a couple of exceptions, had some of their fleet equipped with Takata airbags. And virtually all of them. You had virtually every European manufacturer, all of the US manufacturers, all of the Japanese, and all of the Koreans, all were selling airbags with Takata, or excuse me, selling cars with Takata airbags. And the problem originated with what they were using as a propellant in the airbag. So how an airbag works is, inside of the hub of the steering wheel is what's called an airbag canister. And since the beginning of airbags, all manufacturers had used a chemical called sodium azide, which is essentially solid rocket fuel. It was extremely stable under all environmental conditions. It had been used by everyone, and there had never been an explosion event until Takata decided to change the propellant to a chemical called ammonium nitrate. And
Tom, let me interrupt you, because some people may be asking, why are we talking about this? I thought 100 million vehicles got recalled. But what I think a lot of people fail to realize is there's still millions of cars out there with Takata airbags.
yeah, and you raise a great point, and the problem is compounded by the fact, and I'll talk about this in a minute, by virtue of the fact that the government has allowed them to use ammonium nitrate in the replacements. And I'll explain to you why that is significant, because traditionally it takes time for the ammonium nitrate to degrade. And I don't want to get too technical with you guys, but essentially ammonium nitrate is nothing more than fertilizer. It is highly unstable in hot and humid environments, and is subject to degradation very quickly. And some of you may remember Timothy McVeigh used ammonium nitrate to blow up the Federal Murrah building and killed hundreds of people. Its primary use is for fertilizer, and it had never been used in airbags before Takata decided in its infinite wisdom that they would use it. And the way an airbag works, and I guess I'll need to get to a visual, but the only reason Takata decided to use ammonium nitrate was cost. It is 90% cheaper than sodium azide, and they passed some of these savings on to the automotive manufacturers, but primarily saved them for themselves and profit. They had a plant engineer who we uncovered. It was almost like, no kidding, the movie The Insider. I had a plant manager who quit over the issue. He was the propellant engineer, chief propellant engineer of their Washington plant. And right around 1988, 1999, when Takata was making this decision, he issued some memos saying this is crazy. He kept all of his original handwritten notes. He left memos saying, you know, I'm going to resign over this issue. Nobody's ever done this because of the potential for explosion, and basically was asked to retire. Thankfully, he kept all of his original notes, his original patents that he presented at a meeting showing that there's no such thing as, quote, phase stabilized ammonium nitrate, which simply means there's no such thing as safe ammonium nitrate. So he retires, and we found him during the course of our case with Brandy Owens, which was the case that blew the lid off the lie that Takata had propagated to the NHTSA, as well as, whoops, I already did it. While Rob is correcting my screw ups, this chief plan engineer, his name was Mark Lilly, he tried to run an in around and stop this from happening.
Just click on the screen and it'll keep.
Okay, this screen?
Yeah.
And ultimately he resigned over the issue. But as a background, so you'll understand why this is significant, the inflator is a piece of metal shaped almost like a cup that is located on the steering wheel side directly underneath the horn. And when the airbag functions properly, an electrical signal goes from the sensors in the front of the car, sends a signal to the inflator that causes an electrical charge that causes, when it works properly, the inflator materials to ignite and create a uniform gas. The problem is when you have ammonium nitrate that has degraded, it leads to, instead of a uniform ignition and creation of a gas, it led to a chain reaction explosion. So you have boom, 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 and then the airbag would explode, sending the inflator pieces of metal into the occupant compartment, maiming and killing people, especially smaller women and young folks, because the airbag, instead of hitting them in the chest, would be hitting them in the neck and face region.
Well, and that's one thing that I think should be a big point here is anyone that does intake for injury clients at your offices, when it comes to Takata airbags, you should ask any person, single vehicle, multi-vehicle crash, it doesn't matter. Did your airbag deploy? And if it did, do you have any lacerations above the waist, right?
Correct.
And Tom's going to tell you about how this whole bankruptcy and settlement is set up. But even small lacerations, if we can prove it was a Takata airbag, which we normally can from the VIN, small lacerations from an airbag going off are substantially compensable because of that. So I encourage everyone with your intake to ask those questions. And if you have them, give us a call. We can probably tell you that day if it's a Takata airbag vehicle. And if it is, we can send people out, and you'll be surprised at what they're paying to settle these cases because of the bankruptcy settlement.
And you also can check with the VIN of the vehicle. You can go to NHTSAsafercar.gov and plug in the VIN, and that will tell you whether or not it is subject to the recall, which gets to a totally different issue that I want to talk to y'all about in just a second. But when you have one of these explosions, this is what it actually looks like on the inside of the car. This is an inflator. This was run in a test. And like I said, instead of getting a uniform ignition of the propellant, you have an explosion, and that literally sends shrapnel into the vehicle. I've handled cases, unfortunately, where a young teenage girl had her throat and her carotid artery slit where she hit a speed bump in a grocery store parking lot. I've had cases, a number of cases, where teenagers and younger women were blinded. And y'all can just imagine, you know, it's
It's like a grenade.
Yeah, it's exactly like a grenade. Let me just forward through this. This is the case, and the reason this is significant is if you look at the car, there's virtually zero damage to it. Brandy Owens was on 400 when she was braking to avoid stop traffic and stopped her car and said, "Woo, everything's going to be all right." She got tapped from behind, rolled into the car in front. Airbag blew out and blinded her. And this was a brand new car, only had 2,000 miles on it. And the accident happened, or the explosion happened in October. Blew the entire steering wheel off of her car, sent pieces and fragments of shrapnel all throughout the car. And this is what's called the bat wing. This is the top of the inflator. And it literally came off like a piece of shrapnel from a hand grenade and blew through the airbag. And this was a test we ran showing how it would perform when there was a proper propellant. And that's the size of the piece of metal that hit Brandy and ruptured her eye. She's obviously permanently blinded, but Brandy showed a lot of courage. She refused early settlements, refused to be gagged, and spoke to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and her actions led to the recall being expanded from a few isolated Hondas to every single airbag in the world with ammonium nitrate propellant. So it was a huge thing she did, and I was so very proud of her. But unfortunately, the problem didn't stop, and it hasn't stopped with the recalled batches. The federal government, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that new vehicle manufacturers of new cars should get the new and improved old-fashioned propellant, which was sodium azide before the Takata disaster, and has allowed manufacturers to use Takata replacements, putting the same crap back in cars. And what they have done is delayed the problem. In other words, it's a quick fix where they can take airbags out and put the exact same thing back in, and it defies logic. So you would think the problem would be eliminated, and it hasn't. This is a case that is an older first generation Takata disaster, but that we have going on in Clayton County. But if you'll look closely here, the airbag deployed on the passenger side in such a forceful manner that it went through the windshield and provided really good protection for the windshield wipers. But our client, unfortunately, had no protection and has a horrific brain injury because she hit the A-pillar instead of the airbag. And this is the rupture hole. This is, again, a passenger side airbag, not a driver's side steering wheel. So this actually came out of the glove compartment, or directly above the glove compartment. And unfortunately, our client has a horrible traumatic brain injury. We've also handled, this is unfortunately, thank goodness, all she has is scars, but a young lady who had her Honda Civic again explode and sent shrapnel into the occupant compartment. We've had a variety of cases where kids are getting facial injuries. This is a piece of shrapnel that embedded into a client's arm. One of the other ways that if your client's healed, you may find evidence in the medical records that refers to shrapnel being in their bodies. These are medical records where we have had this noted. We've also had cases where they actually, the shrapnel comes out in such a manner that it can injure you in pretty much anywhere. It's just like you said a great example is a hand grenade. This was a case against Ford where it actually came out like a bullet and injured our client. I'd like to go back just to talk to you about the recall and the bankruptcy of Takata. And Takata, unfortunately, escaped criminal prosecution. There were a number of individuals in a case, in Brandy Owens' case, that we uncovered that had exchanged emails that the government never bothered to get that showed that they were very aware of the problem. One of the emails actually was addressed to two senior Takata engineers in their Detroit facility, where they admitted that they were hiding the defect and that if anybody ever found out about this, somebody was going to go to jail. And that memo literally exists. And during the criminal proceedings, when they were giving the government $1 billion, most of it to be used by the automotive manufacturers to cover their cost, and very, very little of it to go to the victims, I tried to get the government to ask me for those documents in an open court hearing, and they said, "Man, we just want our $1 billion." So it was a sham settlement, and guilty folks were relieved of criminal responsibility to the unfortunate penalty of automotive driving folks, customers. So right now, the bankruptcy process allows two companies to channel victims, even though they're not bankrupt. Honda and Nissan are the only two signatory companies that can actually pull you into the bankruptcy process if you have a Takata airbag claim. The rest of the manufacturers, you are not subject to that. Now, the good news is if you have a low to moderate case, the bankruptcy process actually is a pretty good deal. If you have a serious injury, it is an awful option. And there's certain steps that you have to take to jump out of that process that I won't waste your time with now. But if you have any questions about that, you can email me, and I'd love to work with you. And this is probably a good transition.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to other defects now, but as we said before, ask all of your clients, did your airbag deploy? Did you have any lacerations? If they have any in their face, their chest, their arms, and the airbag deployed, you certainly want to investigate that, and we're happy to work with you on it.
And obviously, get your hands on the car before you do anything. You can't let that get out. No car, no car case.
No product, no product liability.
Yeah, it goes for everything. One of the things that we're seeing on the horizon, a lot of our auto crash lawyers have been concerned about self-driving vehicles and how they may be put out of business by those. And the truth is, for all you younger lawyers, you probably are going to be in 20 years, but it's going to take 20 years. I'll make it to the end, Rob. You maybe not. When they perfect this technology, it's going to put a lot of folks out of business. Auto insurers, wrecker lots, car repairs. But we're a long way away from that. And every single year, we see legislation that we're trying to keep a handle on, where car companies are trying to get immunized for self-driving cars at the expense of the safety of the American public. They literally have tried to pass legislation to immunize them for putting in a very poorly tested system and unleashing it on the American public. And so far, we have been successful in squashing this because of some very notorious wrecks that have happened out there. And one of the things that we look to when we're preparing any case is advertising. What has the automotive community done to advertise a particular safety feature? And one of my favorites is by Mercedes.
This is what it would be like behind the wheel of a self-driving car. Sitting just as you are, your hands are not on the wheel, your feet are not on the pedals, And your eyes don't even have to be on the road. At Mercedes-Benz, we've road tested autonomous driving over 10,000 miles on highways and in heavy city traffic. The future of the automobile. Brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
And that's the actual leader in worldwide safety is Mercedes, and they're bragging about running tests on vehicles for 10,000 miles. That's like driving it around a parking lot. And they have had problems. This is another example of a problem that they never foresaw. And when I say they, I mean the automotive manufacturers. They never saw the potential for hackers to come in and hack a car. And this actually happened with Jeep.
It's not fun to have your 2-ton SUV's brakes hacked just as you're parking in front of a ditch. Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh. That's what I've learned from Charlie Miller and Chris Balasek, a pair of hackers who have spent the last year developing a piece of software that can wirelessly sabotage this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. It hasn't been altered in any way. There are no devices attached to it. But like many thousands of Jeeps around the world, it can be remotely hacked over the internet through a cellular connection to its entertainment system that would allow someone to take over its steering, its transmission, and even its brakes. To demonstrate that, I'm going to act as today's crash test dummy and drive it on the highway here in St. Louis, while Charlie and Chris hijacked its digital systems from Charlie's house miles away. They wouldn't tell me what they had plans, but they assured me that it wouldn't be anything life-threatening.
That sounds.
Remember, Andy, no matter what happens, don't panic.
It's not the first time I've driven a car while it's being attacked by these two hackers. But in 2013, they were in the back seat, and their laptops were wired into the vehicle through a port in its dashboard. Now they're sending the same sort of attacks remotely, and I have no idea what they might do.
He's going as fast as I've seen him. So first we're going to turn the fan on him.
Yeah, let's turn the fan on, see if he even notices.
Let me just see if I can forward through that. Essentially, you have some computer nerds that hack in there and start changing the controls of the vehicle. That is a problem. That is a fly on an elephant's fanny of a problem. But it's just another issue that they have not properly addressed. The technology is so raw and so undeveloped that the fact that they want to essentially use the American public as guinea pigs is unbelievable. And they continue to have problems showing up. I mean, they have autonomous vehicles that have been in a number of wrecks. This is I hope to get the chance to use this, but this is another ad, and I'll just play it quickly, where Mercedes is telling the consuming public that you can't crash this car even if you try. And
It's chaos out there, but the M-Class sees in your blind spot. Pulls you back in your lane. Even brakes all by itself. It's almost like it couldn't crash even if it tried. The 2014 M-Class.
obviously, you can imagine how that would play in a corporate rep's depot. But Tesla had the first major crash, and which helped stall or at least slow down the legislation that they were trying to put through to immunize car manufacturers. Volvo, again, another leader in automotive safety, actually came out in an announcement about their collision avoidance, their new technology, and they had scheduled a press conference to show what a wonderful device this was, and invited the worldwide press corps to the Volvo Test lab to show them this impressive new technology when this blooper happened. It was supposed to show how the car, an S60 sedan, would stop on its own short of hitting a parked truck, and it didn't pan out. I love. That wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
And this comment
It's
here
supposed to
is
stop.
supposed to stop short on its own. And this comment here is priceless.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've had some kind of mishap with the testing here.
Whoops.
Apologize for that. This car actually,
There were some rather very well publicized wrecks involving Uber and self-driving vehicles. Again, this was approximately 2017 when, again, they were trying to push legislation and these wrecks came out. This is an Uber car, just to give you a quick synopsis, where it was completely autonomous, no driver, and it runs a red light. And thankfully, how do I go backwards? Don't worry about it. It's not. You'll have to look carefully. He stopped right here for traffic. And if you look to your left, there's a red light, and there goes your Uber autonomous car and would have hit that pedestrian had he not stopped. There was an Uber death where a pedestrian was hit and killed. There have been a number of wrecks. There was a very well publicized one in Arizona where an Uber vehicle, autonomous vehicle, ran a red light and killed someone. This is a Tesla that was the first recorded death of a driver. He is driving, and unfortunately, the sensors do not pick up a stalled truck. And God bless him, he hits it head on and was killed in this wreck. This, on a less awful note, is a Volvo dealership owner who was making a commercial to show the wonders of their brake avoidance autonomous technology. And he's at the dealership. That's him in the pink shirt. And he's going to demonstrate the effectiveness of the automatic braking vehicle override. And thankfully, no dealer owners were hurt in the making of this video. But again, it's just more evidence of what can happen with this technology. Eventually, 20 years from now, it will be perfected. But in the interim, you're going to see all kinds of horrible things happening. Pedestrians getting killed, folks relying on this technology to their detriment and getting in all kinds of crashes. One of the things that NHTSA investigated in the Uber wreck is that the cars are not capable of picking up unexpected conditions that occur out there every day in the real world. A construction zone, a pothole, multiple vehicles blocking the sensors to pick up another vehicle. All of these things cannot be corrected overnight. They take years to develop. They take years of development of the sensors, and they take years of developing an algorithm to calibrate all this and to interpret all of the sensor information. So where do the defects come from? Well, number one, there's too few of the sensors. You have sensors that are not capable of performing the technology. You have improper calibration of good sensors. And then the real problem is an improper algorithm that allows you to switch off from human driver to autonomous and vice versa. And there's been a real glitch in the handoff. the things that the NHTSA investigation revealed, I kind of touched on a little bit, but they had never created an algorithm to teach the system how to react if you're in a construction zone, or if the driver has to intervene more often than the computer thinks it should, or multiple vehicles in a crowded city traffic. Difficulty in dealing with, again, like I said, dropping off between driver and technology, and then difficult things like hills, things that we drive in every single day. So, and it takes literally millions and hundreds of millions of miles to account for all of these unforeseen irregularities that occur.
So before we move on to the next type of auto product case, what's the takeaway for attorneys who are doing intake on crash cases? You look for any aspects of which the brake avoidance system, the autopilot, if you will. What other things should they look for to kind of try to recognize the potential for one of these?
That's a great question. And Chris Glover with our firm is handling one of these cases now, and that's a perfect example. He has a trucking case where the truck was supposed to be equipped with the braking radar that's supposed to override the driver if there is a need to have an emergency stop. And while the truck was equipped with that particular brake avoidance, and it was active, it did not stop the truck driver from rear-ending a unfortunate family where a couple of people were killed because the brake avoidance did not operate as it was designed to do. So that's one example. If your clients get rear-ended by another car and they've got $25,000 in coverage and you've got a paralyzed client, you're going, what am I supposed to do? Well, one of the things that you can look for is, was the vehicle that struck him equipped, or could it have been equipped with brake avoidance technology? For example, a lot of manufacturers are selling this as an option, and the technology is out there. So that's one way you can look for collision avoidance cases, is where you have limited insurance available to your clients. Is, did the other vehicle have a collision avoidance system, or could it have? Now, obviously, you can't do this with a broken arm or a broken leg. The injuries have got to be catastrophic. And when I say catastrophic, unfortunately, death is just the beginning of the level of injury. You'd have to have paralysis, brain damage, but a very significant injury, because these cases are obviously extraordinarily expensive to work up. And the automotive community are fighting, they're fighting these cases tooth and nail, and it requires multiple experts, not just our traditional accident reconstructionist, design guy, biomechanic, life care planner, but you're going to have computer design folks involved as well. So they are extraordinarily difficult and complex cases, but very much worth it if you have a client who can't be compensated appropriately in a wreck scenario.
Well, tell us about other auto products.
Okay, now we have your what I call your traditional product liability cases, and those involve seat belts, airbags, lack of stability control, door latch failures, tire failures, roof crush, fuel systems, seat designs, crashworthiness in general, mostly from rear impacts, and unintended acceleration or throttle sticks. Single vehicle rollovers, quite frankly, have all been but eliminated with the advent of electronic stability control, but they're still out there, and those are cases that you still need to look out for. Rear impact crashworthiness is something that we talked about just a minute ago, but has really gone overlooked because there is virtually no crash test compliance for rear crashworthiness other than you've got to pass the 301 fuel system test. And there's very little testing by the automotive manufacturers and very little protection for occupants. So when you have a frontal crash, you have the engine to help dissipate energy and provide weight from a physics standpoint that will lessen the crash pulse that you don't have in the rear. And you have an immediate energy transfer. And what you see happening in conjunction with auto manufacturers that don't have solid rear crashworthiness protection is they also use crappy seats. The seats then fold down and snap, and you have folks that are getting paralyzed in rather minimal. I'm handling a case now that's a 10-mile-an-hour Delta V, and a lady is a high quad because her seat back collapsed because of a combination of things. Lack of rear structural integrity for the core, coupled with virtually a lawn chair as a driver's seat. And we've done a lot of testing of seats in rear impact cases. And in fact, most manufacturers design their seats to meet this antiquated pull test that's expressed in FMVSS 209, but essentially a lawn chair can pass it. That was my cue to move on, sorry. So,
No,
I get a little carried away. So another area that folks sometimes overlook, and I was talking to our new associate Brooke about this yesterday, are tire defects. It is absolutely imperative to get on a tire defect case from the very beginning because evidence gets lost immediately. You've got to get the scalp of the tread. That's why it is so critical. I can't tell you how many cases our investigator has helped us with getting the scalp immediately and matching that up. But
what he means by that is if pieces of the tire come off, we need to have someone on the roadway out there as soon as possible to find those pieces and match them up with the tire that detreaded or failed.
Yeah, because you'll find tire treads all over the place. You've got to match them up, which is very difficult to do. But it is the most important evidence in a tire case. And
these are can be single vehicle wrecks where someone calls you, they talk to your intake, and someone's tragically hurt, and your person may ask them, well, what happened? She lost control and left the roadway. Your office might turn that down because you think there's no liability, single vehicle, single driver, but it could be a tire defect case, especially if someone's hurt that bad.
Yeah, and again, I can't tell you how important it is to get on that on the front end. There are a multitude of defects that are involved in tire cases. Obviously, the most obvious is to look for tread separations. This is hysterical. This is a video where one of the leading tire experts, and there's a little salty language. I apologize if anybody gets upset about bad language, but this is so funny. This is a test that was run by Ford's leading expert in vehicle stability, where he had a tread separation that he was doing for his test to show a jury how easy it is to control a car once you have a tread separation. So he knew the tread separation was going to occur, and he rolled the car anyway.
They were trying to show that if the tire failed, you could still keep it in control. And this
Correct.
was his attempt to show that.
Yeah, this is his attempt to show it. And they tried to hide this test. And we got our hands on it. And actually, Chris got his hands on it in a case. And, so he had touted in every case he testified in, look, this is all you got to do. Take your foot off the gas. Don't jam on the brakes. And
Essentially blaming the driver for failing to control the car.
And they blame the driver in every one of these cases. So here he is, knowing it's tread stuff is happening. call 911. Again, nobody was hurt in the making of this video, except their feelings and their pocketbooks. That hurt them, and he still testifies in tire cases, believe it or not. Some other types of defects that we have dealt with: door latch cases. This can happen when passengers think their doors are locked and they still come open in rollovers. Seatbelt defects, we have just a multitude of things that can happen. Either the belt can spool off the retractor like fishing line and it won't lock. Belts can come unlatched because of problems with the buckle. So you always need to look at, even if the police officer says unbelted, you know, their logic is often very flawed. Person's ejected, therefore they couldn't be wearing their seatbelt. You still need to look at that potential, especially if your client says they're wearing their belt. You can look at the airbag download to see whether or not the belt was engaged pre-crash. So and this was a case where the belt was still buckled, but because the plaintiff was ejected, the police officer, using his logic, said, well, you know, he couldn't have been wearing a seatbelt. How could he get ejected? When in fact he was. Slack had been introduced into the belt during the rollover sequence, and he essentially became unrestrained and was ejected and killed. We've had a number of cases involving post-collision fuel-fed fires. We have one now in DeKalb involving a rear impact of a very low speed of a Honda vehicle that burst into flames. Got one involving a Toyota vehicle. What you're looking for, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier about rear impact crashworthiness, is you have the most volatile fuel source, the fuel tank, in the crush zone in some vehicles. Now, because of litigation, they have started moving the location of fuel tanks forward of the rear axle. But believe it or not, Rob, there are cars out there today, a la the Ford Pinto, that still have the fuel tank mounted in the crush zone in between the rear axle and the rear bumper. And of course, there's nothing to protect it in the event of a rear impact. And we see low speed crashes where the fuel system is absolutely ripped open and folks get burned alive and don't have any other injuries. I mean, that case I have now, a young man, God bless, was horribly burned and has no other injuries, not a broken bone, not a scratch. He just was burned.
Low impact, he would have survived had the fire not.
Yeah, he had no injury other than his thermal burns. So those cases are out there. This is a rare defect. Toyota had this design. It didn't last long, but there are certain Toyota vehicles where they know they've made a crummy seat. So they put this anti-submarining device in there, and we're handling a case now where a woman was paralyzed. This is 100 pounds of weight, and this is the force that this seat, which is supposed to push your buttocks up to cause the belt to remain attached over your iliac crest to prevent what's called submarining, or the belt riding up and tearing apart your intestines. And I mean, in theory, it was a really good design, you know, sort of like theoretically and realistically, it was a disaster. So you have this device that's supposed to position your pelvis and buttocks better. And what it does is it actually breaks your spine. And excuse me,
force.
Yeah, that was 200 pounds of weight. I'm sorry. Not 100. So that is kind of I doubt anybody's going to see that because so few vehicles have it, but it's just another thing that's out there. Frontal airbag defects, in addition to Takata, we are seeing all kinds of defects, either where the airbags don't deploy at all, where they deploy too forcefully. They're not tethered so that the airbag actually comes off of the attachment and causes eye injuries. And again, these are totally unrelated to the Takata shrapnel defect, but we've seen some of these in low speed wrecks where the airbag arguably should not even have deployed, and yet we are seeing aggressive airbags causing extensive injuries. And again, these are always, or for the most part, single vehicle wrecks. This is another single vehicle wreck where we had a side curtain airbag where a kid unfortunately was horribly injured in a side impact, where the airbag on the impact side did not deploy, but because of a computer glitch with the algorithm, it deployed on the other side. So you have a near side impact where it didn't deploy and the bag deployed on the other side.
Tom, we have a question. We only have about 8 minutes left, but I want to get to it. Someone has asked, please talk about the maximum age of vehicles that can have viable product liability cases. And I know you're going to tell them that we do have a statute of repose, but there's a way to get around that if you have failure to warn, or if you can show some malicious conduct. But
right. And you know, the statute of repose is a problem, but as a smarter, older lawyer said to me one time, I've never seen a good case that couldn't get around the statute of repose. And currently it's 10 years, and I think it's criminal because everybody drives cars older than 10 years. But you have to prove you have two avenues. You can show willful conduct or a continuing failure to warn. And if it's a defect of any merit, that's always a way to get around it. Or if you have a situation like Takata, where you can show that the automotive company or the component part manufacturer knew of the defect and yet hid it, covered it up, or took steps to deceive the public. And it can be a sort of a little bit of both. In the words of Forrest Gump, you can have failure to warn coupled with willful conduct.
so the short answer is it's generally 10 years, but there are exceptions to that we can utilize to get around it. If you think you have a case, don't hesitate to call just because the vehicle might be older than 10 years. We're glad to continue to look at it.
We talked about this just a minute ago about seat back defects. These are very, very viable cases. Again, you've got to have a client who is paralyzed or worse, because they, again, like all auto product cases, they're very expensive to pursue. But there are these cases are out there, and they're absolutely horrible if you have a bad seat back. And most of them involve, how do I go back again? I'm sorry. That's pretty good. Only 2 times I did this.
Great.
Some of them involve ejection. Some of them tragically involve an adult where their seat back collapses and gets ramped into the back seat and hurts or kills a child. I've had cases that you would not believe, low speed rear impacts where the seat back collapses and a parent, thinking they've done the good thing and put their child in a child seat in the back, ends up ramping into the back seat and injuring or killing their child. So always keep a lookout for these cases. We have heavy truck cases that we have handled a number of cab guard or lack of cab guards or ineffective cab guards, where this was a case Ben Baker had, where this tractor was advertised as having a cab guard, and lo and behold, logs pierced it as if there was nothing there. And unfortunately, the truck driver was killed in this crash where a tractor was equipped with an alleged cab guard.
Similar to roof crush cases.
Reverse roof crush, yeah.
A lot of these big trucks do not have sufficient safety guards on the top of the cab. So you may have a single vehicle wreck where the truck rolls over and the driver or occupant is killed. That's probably a defect case.
And yeah, and you bring up a good point. There are no roof crush standards for heavy trucks. So if you guys have a truck driver calls you and they're involved in a rollover, or their family call you more likely, there are zero standards that tractor trailer cab has to meet for roof crush, which is obscene. This is, again, that's a cab guard that we developed in litigation that would have prevented the injury. Again, this is going to roof crush. This is a good example of what happens to a tractor in any kind of roll, because there is zero rollover roof crush protection for those vehicles. These cases, heavy truck fire cases, are viable not only for the tractor trailer driver, but for occupants who are unfortunately hurt or killed because of these fires. And the fuel tanks are mounted outside the frame rails and are easily pierced by a car, causing a fire that will kill not only the folks in the tractor trailer, but for passengers of cars that strike them. The way to prevent this is to mount the fuel system on the inboard of the frame rails, also to put the batteries that are usually the ignition source away from the fuel source. So hopefully I've got in under the 1 hour tag.
You did. 2 minutes remaining. If there's any questions, please shoot those on the Q&A. I would like to tell you about one other thing that we have been litigating for the past few years, and it's out there. It's going to continue to be out there, and that is guardrail cases. As an example, we had a client who called their attorney. She was drunk. She was driving at night with the friends in the car. She had just left a bar. She lost control. She hit a guardrail. Normally, you'd probably turn that case down. Well, the guardrail pierced the side of the vehicle and amputated both of her legs. The referring attorney didn't know what he had or if he had anything, but he called us. And we knew that these type of guardrails that are throughout Georgia and the Southeast are defective. They can be defective from the way they're installed because they're too rigid, or they could be defective because there's a known defect in a lot of the metal that they're using. It doesn't react the way it was designed to react when the vehicle hits it, and it turns into a spear. So keep an eye out for those as well, guard wreck cases. That's going to be the end of our time today. I don't see any other questions. We're right at the 1 hour mark. We appreciate everybody coming, and we look forward to seeing you next quarter.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob.